Good afternoon. This is the Grand Terrace County Board of Commissioners special budget meeting, Friday, January 17th, 2014. It's 3 o'clock. If we could stand for Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
These special budget meetings of the Grand Terrace County Board of Commissioners have been set to take place from January through March. Purpose of these meetings is to discuss departmental budgets. The initial meetings will be discuss schedule, strategy, and future meetings. Department presentations will be done on a scheduled basis. Can we have a roll call, please?
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas?
Yep.
Rennie?
Here.
Max Bauer?
Here.
Lathrop?
Here.
Inman?
Here.
Lemko?
Here. Next is public comment. Do we have to read public comment if we don't have anybody
There's
here?
no one here.
Okay, unless you wanted to say something? Okay. So we'll disperse with public comment the rules. Next is the discussion information requested has been provided for file services, mandated versus non-mandated. Mr. Benda.
Okay, we in your packet you have a rather dated list, but it's not changed much over the last couple of years. This is kind of a 2-year-old try at to define what kind of services are being provided with county funds and that are brought, not only general funds, but other funds, including those that are generated from the work that's done in these departments. The second set, we took a crack at taking the 2014 budget and dividing it into a mandated and discretionary services list with some citations that are abbreviations. I mean, if you really wanted every law that pertained and every site that pertained to some of these departments, for example, the probate court or the Board of Commissioners for that matter, this would be the primary one that talks about the powers of the Board of Commissioners is MCL 46.1, but there are many other places in the state statutes that speak to things that govern the Board of Commissioners and things they have to do. For example, in the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act, there are things that the governing body is required to do, like adopt a budget by a certain time. And so it's not an exhaustive list, but it's to give you a flavor of what is mandated by law and what is not mandated. What it doesn't do is doesn't tell you what level of service has to be provided. We know that our laws require, especially in constitutional and statutory offices, that the services be provided at a reasonable and necessary level. That's the term of art that's used by the courts when they interpret funding disputes between clerks, treasurers, register of deeds, judges, sheriffs, prosecutors, and the Board of Commissioners, who holds the purse strings. If it's not at a reasonable and necessary level to be able to carry out the functions, the statutory and constitutional functions of the office, then there's a legal problem. We aren't trying to define what that is. For example, let's take the Register of Deeds. If we cut 2 positions out of the Register of Deeds, leave 2 people there. Okay, so the backlog, they get backed up, and there's no way they start to get to the point where people are trying to get their homes closed and they can't get the work papers out of the Register of Deeds, can't get them filed properly on a timely basis. It starts to impede the reasonable and necessary level of service for that department. So you have to fund them at a reasonable and necessary level. That doesn't mean that there's no waiting. It just means that it's got to be a reasonable and necessary level. So when you talk about mandate, all these mandated services, that's what you got to kind of think about when you talk about what you're going to provide. And especially in the area of the courts, the sheriff and the prosecutor are special groups. The employer are employers under the law. They have judges have really the highest level of power over their operations. They are the employers. When we send them money, they have the right to spend it the way they want. They're not subject to our policies and procedures other than, as we can tell them that they have to follow certain spending guidelines, but you can't impose arbitrary spending guidelines on them. You can only impose those which are statutory or within your purview to do. So, and all the other departments have varying levels based upon what kind of money is coming into them. The health department, for example, we talked last time about substance abuse and mental health. And in the health department as well, there are base levels that you cannot go below. They established them a long time ago, and there's long histories about how these things were established. In the case of mental health, it was the establishment of an authority by the county board, froze the level in statute, and that's the number you have to pay, no less than that. In the health department's case, there used to be a cost-sharing formula. The state had promised to pay for 50% of the health insurance or health department expenditures that were eligible for cost sharing under the States Act because they mandate all these services. And with Governor Engler, he changed that so he would contract out those and either make the health department or someone else compete for the service. And they came up with ways to get around the 50% state cost share. But there is a minimum level of funding that is required in the health department. And we are above that, but not appreciably so. We have knocked them down quite a bit, especially in the 2014 budget. So when you look at the mandated, non-mandated list, you're going to see what you're looking at here is a general fund appropriation. Okay, so now there's, in your budget book, you have a kind of a sheet like this with these departments with dollar amounts, and the next page has special revenue funds. And that's all, some of those funds require appropriations from the general fund. And for example, the fund number 131, the general fund is always 101. The 131 fund is the circuit court fund, and the circuit court fund is where we account for the expenditures of the circuit court, including those that are done for Antrim and Leelanau County. And there's a formula based upon caseload that we allocate a percentage of the cost to Antrim and Leelanau. And each one of those and the county of Grand Traverse has an appropriation from its general fund to this fund to pay the total expenses. And the fines and forfeit, things, court costs and things that are paid as revenue are reduce that cost. It's kind of a formula-driven basis. So it's a complex formula, but in concept, it makes sense. You have expenditures, you have revenues. You subtract the revenues off, and this is how much we've got to come up with out of our pockets. We divide it up on a caseload basis between the three counties, and that's how it works. It's a little bit, there are a lot of little nuances to it, but that's how the appropriations work. And they come from the general fund, and if you look down here, you're going to see a circuit court appropriation that comes into this fund as a revenue source, and then the total expenditures are actually paid out of this 131 fund. So I just wanted to kind of explain the basics of all this.
Chris?
Dave, one of the areas that I've always believed that we can save money in are the courts and court security. How do we compare with other courts, district court? Our judges, district court, travel to other districts. Our circuit court judges travel to other circuits. How do we compare with security services that other areas provide versus what we provide? And is there, for instance, we have armed bailiffs, uniformed armed deputies in our courtrooms. I've said this before, I'll say it again. We also have, I'm sorry?
They're corrections officers.
I'm
They're
sorry,
not deputies.
corrections
There is a
officers.
difference.
Thank you. But they have uniforms and sidearms.
Yep.
Do we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay. We're nodding, everyone agrees on it. Okay. We have DK Security at the door, who basically scan our car keys. And our steel-toed shoes. I think there's an opportunity to save here. Whether it is eliminating the door security, we have uniformed officers with sidearms. That certainly is a presence. That talks about security. When you walk into a courtroom, you see that individual there, the corrections officer. Chances are you're not going to make too much of a mess in the courtroom. You're not going to cause too much trouble. Do we I see this as redundancy. Either we eliminate, this is just me, either we eliminate DK security at the door, or can we provide DK security as bailiffs in the courtroom? I just don't see how we're serving, I mean, what is the level that we are required to do?
Judges can order the sheriff to have a person in his courtroom.
Fine.
Judges
But
can do
we
that.
But can they order us to have security at the door? When they have security in their courtroom?
No.
Okay,
No, that's something that was decided here a long time ago. All
right.
After, I'm sure, some consternation. There are still courthouses in Michigan that don't have security at the door.
how many other courthouses where our judges travel do not have security at the door?
I don't know
Do
the
you
answer
know?
to that.
Does Leelanau and Antrim have?
I imagine Leelanau would.
It'd
don't
be
know
interesting to
about
know if
Antrim.
Antrim and Leelanau have them.
They
Because
may.
I just
but
don't
just a
see-
dwindling number, you know, I mean,
This
there have
is
been so many
100
incidents. It has to do with, you know, I mean, the nature of the courts.
This is $175,000 a year. This is a sizable chunk of money. And if the judges want, this is just me, if the judges want uniformed officers, corrections officers with sidearms in their courtroom, I've got no problem with that. They won't see me in their courtroom causing any trouble, and most other people as well. But to have individuals checking car keys at the door, and I understand, I have gone through security at the courthouse, and I went, oh crap, I've got something in my pocket that I shouldn't have. And I go back out to my car, and I put it in my car, and I come back through. I see an opportunity for savings there.
I think that could be one of those questions that we might want to ask our administrator to look into and be able to report back to us at the time when we review the court's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sonny?
Couple things we have to know. Number one, anytime we have a Grand Traverse County prisoner in that courtroom, we are required to have a corrections officer there.
Fine.
We have no question about that.
Fine.
You know, and you've all heard me talk about the corrections officer standing at the courtroom handing papers back and forth from the judge to the clerk, which I highly object to. You know, I firmly believe there should be a crew of bailiffs, if you will, whether they be retired police officers or whatever, and they should be handling that courtroom security. That being said, anytime we have a prisoner in that courtroom, we are still required to have a corrections officer with that prisoner.
No problem with that at all.
Even if we have a armed bailiff in the courtroom.
Fine.
In regard to what I commonly refer to as the toothless dog at the front door, that's a discussion that we have to have with the judges. Because
you.
they are pretty adamant about the
Thank you,
necessity of
Commissioner.
having that.
Thank you.
Charlie?
I'd like to know what our sheriff thinks about the security at the door, and I can tell you, we had an assault at security at the door here not that long ago, 3-4 years ago, over at District Court. And that was at security at the front.
Oh, yeah, within the last year, we've
Someone
had shootings
brandished a
in
knife
parking
or
lots.
something like
and
that.
You know,
Courts
all
generate
it
those
takes
kind
is
of
one
clientele.
instance, and you wish you'd had it.
That's
Yeah.
my point, I think.
You know, and you know, I don't disagree with you, Chris, on some of that stuff, but Traverse City's a little bit different animal than what Leelanau
Bel Air
and
is.
some of the other smaller counties might be. We have a lot more cases, a lot more people going through there. I think you'd almost, if you look at the number of courts that have the security at the entrance, what is the number of people that go through that door on a daily basis, would make probably a difference as to whether or not you have security or not. It's my feelings, you know, I mean, it's just a thought.
You know, Herb, as Commissioner Fleece, who is a retired police officer, said, you know, somebody can sit outside the courtroom and do whatever damage they want as somebody walks into the courthouse. you are absolutely not going to prevent 100%
No.
of the incidents that occur. But at what point do you say, you know what, maybe an armed bailiff, an armed corrections officer in the courtroom is all we need?
Yeah, well, and also I think it could be, ended up being an insurance matter. When you start looking at our MMR insurance, we have that court security. They look at that as one of our security measures, and so therefore they're going to probably look at us in a different light.
Yeah,
I've seen that happen in
they help
my
us fund
insurance company.
scanners.
When you start doing proactive stuff, the agencies start to look at those and say, you're doing what needs to be done. So I think, but it's a discussion that we need to have a question asked, and then determine if you want that information, and then if we have that more discussion, we should have that discussion with the courts.
Sounds good.
And the sheriff.
Dan?
Just a point of information for me. Can we say to the judges that we don't want to pay for these guards, or do we just say, we don't want to give you this X amount of money, and they decide what to do? I mean, can we say we don't want to pay for the guards, be that specific?
Which one, at the front or inside?
I'm not, in the courtrooms, obviously up to them,
I-
but at
no.
the front door.
I think dialogue is the way to go on this.
Yeah.
The sheriff and the judges, if you want to explore different ways of doing this, and you want to get their input, I mean, you really do have to get everyone in on the meeting and the discussion, and make sure that everyone talks it through
Right.
to understand what the concerns are in each case. Because the front of the court, all those courts have different needs and clientele and flashpoints, if you will. When you got a couple that's breaking up and there's a child involved and, anything can happen. That's why they want security. They want somebody to be able to go, to stop this from happening. And they want to make sure the weapon doesn't get inside the courtroom or inside the courthouse when those things are about to happen. Somebody's going to lose custody of a child, for example. That's why we see shootings out in the parking lots of courts, because they can't get into the courthouses anymore. But they used to shoot the judge and the, whatever, spouse that they were angry with. So we've had a lot of those instances throughout, my tenure in Michigan. And
Well, give me some examples. Show me that
Chris,
there's a need.
Can we,
I'm sorry.
Sonny had
Yes,
his
I'll
hand
shut
up, and
up.
then
how
Charlie.
to do that's a different question.
This is a discussion that's been going on for a long time, and we had a lot of discussion when we agreed to contract with DK Security to be at the courthouse, whether we were better off to budget additional money for the sheriff and allow him to handle the security, whether we could do it with reserve deputies. We looked at a lot of different things. A matter of 3 years ago, we got very, very lucky and didn't lose one of our detectives in Mount Morenci County. He went there to testify, and a prisoner got out of the courtroom, ran outside, got to a car, and had a shotgun that misfired.
I remember that.
We would have lost a very highly, respected detective in our own department. He was there to testify on that behalf. Whether that security guard at the door would have made a difference, who knows? But the guy's got that kind of intent. You're not going to stop him with a magnetic wand and a screen. So.
So, Charlie,
I
you
just
had
want
your
to know
hand.
if our sheriff had any input on this.
Oh.
On the issue of the.
Well, my question is do we want to have that discussion when we have the judges here, or do you want to have that discussion today?
Good point.
Chris?
I would like to know if the sheriff can do it better for less money than DK Security. And if he can, I'll hire him to do it.
Probably not.
Would you like to comment?
Well, I do know that,
Up here.
Either that or one of these.
One of these.
microphones. These are all
go up
on
to the
too, Tom.
microphone here.
I knew I should have come.
Yeah, you We appreciate you being here.
But I am concerned and I am interested, and that's why I'm here. Captain Hall's working on this. There are advantages and disadvantages for us to have bailiffs in the courtroom as opposed to corrections officers. And we'd be happy to sit down with the judges and try to figure out what they want. I'm sure you all know that sometimes it's rather difficult in dealing with the judges, and like Mr. Benda said, I'd just soon not have a court order every single day ordering me to have somebody here, okay, in court at an appropriate time. So, yeah, is there something we can work out? I don't know, but we're willing to sit down and try to do that. They are their masters of the buildings, and sometimes it's, you know, they want certain things, and that's up to them. But we're happy to try to figure something out as best we can.
Also, I think it's important to note that the relationship that we have with our judges is very good, and we are very fortunate. Count your blessings. But I think if we could have a sit-down discussion, that would be appropriate, and maybe Dave and the judges and the sheriff could sit down and do that and have that discussion. I don't think we as commissioners need to be part of that discussion, but they can report back as to what their findings might be. Chris?
I already have an appointment with them, just to let you know.
Oh.
Well, you know, it's dialogue. I need to hear from them
No?
and what they can or cannot do. And
Well, I
and
just-
quite honestly, I don't think they're reticent. I think they'll tell me.
I just think that should be an administration job,
Sonny's
not a
laughing.
commissioner's job, so,
I think it makes more sense.
Okay.
You have it.
Maybe, I don't want to run the meeting, but maybe when we get together, you should be there, because then you can hear our side of the story when they want
I'll bring
something.
my flak
And-
jacket.
And when we say, no, we can't do that, or whatever, but.
I think it is a discussion that commissioners need to be
Do you?
part of.
Okay.
I really do.
all right,
Thank you, Sonny.
works for me.
I just wanted to let Tom know, I heard that on the radio about people putting snow on the road. A lot of people don't know that, so that was a good thing to come out with.
Thank you.
Okay, let's stay on track here, that we're talking about mandated and non-mandated services, and let's continue working in that. Is that all right with you, Dan?
No, I think I had, since we were talking about funds, I had a fund question, but I can ask Dave that at a later point.
Whatever, okay?
No,
FUN?
I'm just trying to get everybody acclimated to what they're
FUND.
about to
Is
talk
it-
about.
Is there any questions on this mandated, non-mandated chart that he's put together with the funds going in and out?
Nope.
You know, I thought it was interesting that the Brownfield administration, he has put down there as a desirable.
Right.
And you have a couple of them others that there are desirables that are in there.
It's a little bit above discretionary, is that what it is?
Well, you've got two
Well-
kinds of discretionary. There's, your internal services are discretionary, but you've got to pay payroll and you've got to do some of those things. There's nothing that mandates that you have a payroll person, but somebody's got to do the payroll. Or, you know, the lights and the, you know, there are internal services that are shared by all these departments.
I don't see
Then
any,
there's the desirable, like Brownfield administration, we put, looks like $22,800 this year into Brownfield administration. It's something you can cut. But do you want to? That's up to you.
did you note any of them undesirable?
That's not my job. The commissioners they funded them in the first place, so they were desirable at one time.
Right. I think it's rather interesting to note that in my business, I looked at contracting out for payroll services. And because of the way that we broke our stuff down by departments, by the time we had broken it all down into departments, we'd got our payroll done, and it wasn't going to cut any cost. And I think the same thing here, that by the time you do all your cost accounting analysis and putting all the money into different budgets and making sure that's done, you got 3/4 of your payroll done. The rest of it's push a button and it's automatically done. And, you know, I just think sometimes when we start looking at contracting, there are companies that can do that and save money. I'm not sure that we can do that here. I'm just not sure. I don't know. I don't know what that answer would be. Dan?
Okay, I think this is on target. Let's take a look at the courts. I know that in the courts, we handle people going through divorces and stuff. And you look at, we pay for marriage counseling. Now, do you know how much we pay for marriage counseling, by any chance?
I don't know what the exact number is, but there's a special revenue for that is earmarked out of the marriage license fee. That comes in It's the same number every year almost.
Yeah, but does that pay for it alone, or are we supplementing it, I wonder?
I can't answer that.
Well, here's my question. Let's say we spend $50,000 a year on marriage counseling, or $100,000. If we wanted to pare that out of there and just say, let people find their own marriage counselors, whether that's good or bad, how will we approach that? Can we say that, make it happen, or is that something the judges decide?
I think when they've come in to do their budget presentations,
Okay.
that should be a
That's when we'll
question
do
you
that.
might want to ask.
Okay, cool.
Okay?
Dean's got the
Right.
answer for you.
Dean?
You got an answer?
That particular topic, that's accounted for in our Friend of the Court Fund. Dave was right, in the main source is a fee that's collected. There's a reserve in that fund, and that fund, the annual revenue more than covers the cost of that service.
Cool, all right, thank you.
That brings us-
Chris?
Dean, if that annual revenue more than covers the cost of the service, where does the rest of the revenue go?
Because of the fact that it's restricted, it's accounted for as a restricted fund balance within the Friend of the Court Fund. You could not use that for other purposes. Don Rogers, the Friend of the Court, has always been willing to look at uses of those funds in ways that we
Okay.
can to maximize the use of what we've accumulated.
All right, thank you.
Other questions that anybody has on the funded, non-funded portion of this?
Okay, then, the next item in your packet is the staffing history, and we put together, from 2000 to the present, to 2013, a list of general fund positions, and then on the second page, other funds, and how they've changed over time. And as you can see, the general fund has dropped by about 10 positions since 2000. And interestingly enough, when you start looking at the drops, they're in different areas. I mean, the probate court gave up some, the circuit court gave up one, the district court gave up one from June 2012 and 2013. And some actually went up. The sheriff, road patrol went up because of additional township officer. I think that was in Mayfield and Kingsley and Paradise. We had a big drop in construction code, and that was due to the fall off in construction. Other than that, it's been pretty stable for the other departments. Some pluses pluses and minuses here and there. Some of them were moved.
So for 13 years, we've added 6? Is that what it
Yep.
says? Wow.
Chris?
I would like to know what our general fund budget was for each of these years,
Okay.
so that I can tie that to the amount of personnel that we have. And for
Dennis-
instance,
Dennis
if,
had that done.
go back to when we had a budget of, 38, 39 million,
Yeah.
whatever, and see
The trend.
the trend.
Yeah, Loya
And
had
where,
done it.
yeah, and
Loya
where
had
it
done
is,
that for us.
if
Yeah.
I may.
We can do that.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
got it done.
That's a great idea.
Other
Loya gave
questions?
us that idea.
I thought this was an interesting chart,
Yeah.
to see how the departments have responded for the recession over the years. And they aren't providing services that we used to, and we have done some
Well,
unique stuff along the way.
what's interesting is that the county has grown 10,000 people,
Yeah.
and we've only added 6 additional people to provide services.
Yeah, I think that speaks highly of,
That means we've
How you've been
contained, I
watching
think
the-
we've really contained
Mm-hmm.
the expense side of our FTE.
Yeah. Okay,
That
Chris?
means more people are doing more
Yeah.
with a whole bunch more people. So,
Well, more people the county as a whole is doing more for less, and one of the primary areas that you'll see a reduction in is the custodial staff. That was an opportunity. Jobs were not lost to the community, and the service is still being provided at a savings to the taxpayer, and those are the kinds of things that I hope to hear from department heads. Opportunities.
well, not that I want to dust off the previous conversation, but when I was in Midland, we began our courthouse security process, and the big debate was, are we going to contract out for that, or are we going to have the sheriff do it? And the judges and the sheriff came in and said, we want armed deputies at the door. And so you are spending a lot less than Midland is on the security at the door. I mean, I can tell you it's probably more than double the cost to have the sheriff do it versus armed deputies doing it versus having DK Security or someone like that do it.
I wasn't talking about courthouse security. I was talking about services in general. Are there places in the county, and I think there are, I believe there are, where we can outsource? Those jobs are not lost to the community, and there's a savings to the taxpayer. And it doesn't take away from the department head. Danny Brown is still in charge of the buildings and how clean they are or are not.
Other, Sonny?
One of the places that we see, if we look at the staffing plan carefully, where we've added, additional staffing is in probation. And one of the things, as I think about this program, I remember having the discussion with the courts about what their workload was of their probation officers and how many people each probation officer was responsible for. And the number was absurd. But that being said, one of the things that we have to remember that adds to that workload is our creation of our specialty courts. Because now if someone does an OUIL 3 or OUI, that gets knocked down, I call them OUIL 3 times 8, but they still come in under the drug court program and they get run through as an OUIL 2. But instead of that person going to state prison or at least in the county jail, they're released onto a probation program. But that probation probably requires them to be seen by a probation officer or a judge or both at least once or twice a week, where previously the probation officers were lucky to see each one of their clients once a month. So, the workload for the probation department expanded extensively when we created these specialty courts.
Right.
And, whether, and there's all kinds of discussion whether it's a good thing or it's a bad thing, but, there's a lot of what we're doing with our specialty courts, at least from my perspective, there's no benefit to sending those people to prison because it's not going to take care of the problem. We're better off to work them through some sort of a rehab program or something like that. But in order to do that, we need more supervision, and that's why our probation staffing is increased.
Didn't we also pick up the state probation people into our, didn't they move from the Elmwood?
They're in our facility, but they're not our staff.
Okay, so that doesn't include that group of people. Okay. Other questions on staffing plan?
Okay.
Okay.
We have our accrued liabilities. We were, what you're seeing here is a table that shows our aggregate accrued liabilities, and it's from 1986 to 2000, and this is what Commissioner Maxbauer had requested, and on the following page, you got 1998 through 2012. And the numbers are the same for 98 and 99, as you'll see, in 2000. But this is a function of how we are funded on accrued liabilities. We've made promises to people on pensions. We've said, when you retire, we're going to give you your best 5 years or 3 years times a multiplier.
Years.
Yeah, times your years of service, and that's going to be your defined benefit when you retire. And in order to fund that, till the day they die and on an actuarial basis, we have to have so much money set aside each year. And we started out in 1986 on this table 124% funded, went up to 142, and then it dropped from that point forward down into the 60s by year 2000, and then has proceeded to drop down into the 49th percentile, 49% funded in 2012. Now, we did have a 25% drop in our valuation assets, which total about $41 million in 2012. In 2008, they dropped about 25%, and they've come back a little bit since then, but 2013 is an especially big year for us, and we'll probably see a 25% plus increase in our valuation assets. So, what was $41 million is probably going to be reported to us as $51 million in the next valuation. And on an actuarial basis, we just got a lot better. And that's nice. That's good. So that's a positive on our horizon. And that's, I guess, what I wanted to talk about was there are, if we would have bonded for this
Less amount.
a year ago, the interest rates would have been about 1% lower for the bonds. And when we get the 2013 valuation in, say, June or July this year, we would probably be well overfunded, way overfunded, because we weren't going to do it on an actuarial basis, we were going to do it on a market basis. And MERS is still playing catch-up. That actuarial basis means it's smoothed out over 10 years. Well, when you smooth out $10 million over 10 years, that's $1 million a year. So we're going to see a pretty nice shot in the arm on our required contribution next year. I'm not sure. I'm no actuary, but that's the way my brain works, and it says, you're going to smooth my $10 million surplus over 10 years instead of the 25% instead of 8. It's going to be smoothed out over 10 years. It should be a positive effect for us.
But you really can't quantify that.
I can't do it until June or July, or when that actuarial report comes in.
Mr. Chairman? Would that-
Dan had his name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'll concede to him, I'll wait.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
No, go ahead.
would that, in essence, once we get that in, let's say in June or whatever, and we get a better picture of that dollar amount differential based on those gains, that would mean, in essence, that if the board wanted to move forward with the pension bonds, that we would be borrowing substantially less.
Yes, the required contribution over
Like 10 million.
projected out.
Like $10 million less.
Right.
Potentially.
I mean, yeah, we need
you
to
said
be 80, we
43.
need to have $85 million in the bank. We had 41. They were saying you're 49% funded. Now we're going to have 51 million in the bank versus the 85 or whatever the number turns out to be next year. Yeah, it's going to have an effect. It's going to reduce our annual required contribution somewhat. I can't tell you how much.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, now this is, this UAL as percent of annual payroll, can you explain what that means to me?
Okay, that's, as, we went to a defined contribution plan for new hires back in 2001, which means that every person that retires or quits, and we hire a new person to take their place for the position that they were in, that person is not in the payroll used to calculate this. So every year that goes by, this number is going to skyrocket on us because you got fewer and fewer people as a percent of payroll that is in the defined benefit plan. As the numbers of people still in the plan, active in the plan, drop, the percentage of payroll increases because you still got to pay the same amount. But you're dividing it out among a decreasing pool of
So that's why,
members.
and that's why that in 2012, I mean, it's gone from, let's see, it's gone from 0%
yeah.
all the way to 856%. It sounds terrible.
Yeah, it does sound terrible, but it's
But in
a
essence-
relevant statistic to look at when you have a defined benefit plan and everybody's in the plan, they've always been in the plan. But when you stop the plan, freeze the plan and say no new hires go into this plan, then whoever's in there, and the last one dies, it's done. fewer and fewer people get in there, and as a percentage of the fewer and fewer people, the dollar amount's going to go up, up, up.
But in,
No one ever calls you.
just a clarification, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Larry.
That's after Dickie gets his phone call.
Yeah.
It must be important. But what this is also, I think, telling us is that we potentially are peaking. Remember the graph that we got where the cost of the plan with the Michigan Employment Retirement System would be increasing, and then there would be a point where it would level, and then there would be a line going down, boom?
We're still
Well,
10 years from
what we'd have to understand is, as less people are on the plan, they're retiring, and the people that are on the plan are, unfortunately might be passing away in that interim, there'll be a point in time where the whole plan will dissolve.
Yeah, eventually you'll
Dissolve.
pay the last person, and there will be either money left over, or you're going to have
So
to
there's a
make the
peaking
payment
time,
and pay the last
there's a
person.
peaking time, but there'll also be a time where the payments to going to MERS is going to dramatically slam downward over a period of years.
What I can't tell, is this good or bad? I mean, what does it tell
Well,
us?
the percentage of payroll doesn't tell you anything other than that there aren't very
less
many people
people.
left in
Okay,
the plan.
that-
What it tells you is there's less,
You
there's
got a
not a
big
lot of
number,
people.
It's truly
there aren't a lot
a
of people
useless
to share it with.
So financially, it doesn't mean that much.
The percentage
As far as I'm
doesn't
concerned,
tell
it's a
you.
useless number because it tells us absolutely nothing other than the fact that we have fewer and fewer people
Okay.
paying into the defined
Exactly.
benefit
'Cause it looks
benefit
awful, you know?
program every
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, just
I think there's a good point there in 2004 when we did early retirements. You can see how that affected the number dramatically. It went from 219 to 590%. So we took a lot of people that were on defined benefit and said,
You got 'em off.
You can retire early. So now we got fewer people in there putting money into defined benefit out of the payroll.
22 of them left.
And this is why I've never advocated and never had in any of my administrations, ever had an early out.
22 of them left.
The buyout, what that does is, and I've explained this but I'll just explain it one more time in case you didn't catch it. When you say to somebody who's got 30 years in, we're going to give you an increase in your multiplier of 0.25%, and that costs 3% of payroll, it's 3% of payroll from 30 years ago, and, you know, you put that money in the bank, and it earns interest, and then the 29th year and the 28th year, every year you got to put that 3% of payroll in, and you're supposed to get compounded interest on that money, and that's what you're giving them when you say, I'm going to give you a 0.25% increase in your multiplier. You're going to give them that pile of cash out of your system, and that's why you went from 219 to 590, because you gave everybody a big pile of cash that you didn't pay for over the past 30 years.
And that was not explained to us.
No, that
For the-
wasn't,
for the board
and it
members that
usually
were here.
isn't, and MERS didn't explain it to you.
Right. So Chris,
I have many blonde questions. This is another one, and I've asked this before, but I still don't see the downside on this. MERS froze our payments for us for 3 years, Dean, did they not?
Yes.
Okay. What is the downside of us freezing our payments to MERS going forward and not paying what they ask? I'm saying, okay, we've been paying about 3.9 million every year. Let's just keep paying them 3.9 million, and if they don't like it, too bad, so sad.
Well, the downfall of that, and the reason you got to pay double payments now, is that you're not at $85 million earning interest at 8%. You're at $40 million to pay for those. So
I
that's
still
why they
don't-
keep on jacking up our
I still
requirement.
don't, no, but if we don't pay them, we're going to pay everything that we owe, but if we ourselves stretch it out and say, okay, MERS, you won't work with us, we don't care. This is what we're giving you, 3.9 million every year.
Well, there's
What's the
Gatsby-
downside of that?
Go ahead, Dean.
There's two reasons that you may want to consider not doing that.
And I know you can't wait to share
There's-
them.
The pension standards that you follow and that you should continue to follow require that you make what is known as the actuarial, it's called the ARC, it's the
Yeah.
actuarial
I got
required
that.
payment. That changes a little bit because the new standards put the entire pension liability on your government-wide financial statement.
Right?
Which
But it's a liability sitting out there anyway.
So when the full liability goes on your financial statements, you're going to have the liability there whether you make the annual payment or
Right.
not. But your bond rating agencies will look at that and say, to them, that will be the first sign that Grand Traverse County is experiencing financial difficulty because you're not making the required payment.
And
to
I'm
your
good with
utility
that.
It's a
system.
debt that you owe that you're not paying.
And I'm fine with that. So we can't build a new, 3-story high-rise office building. I have no problem with that. That's just me.
Well, you have always made your payments, and that,
You
you
know
should
me
all be
well.
very proud of that. You've always balanced your budgets, you've met all of your financial obligations, and I believe
I'm
that
not
that's what
suggesting
you-
we don't meet our financial obligations, and we certainly did not meet them over the last 3 years. They froze our payment.
I think it's, that Michigan State Extension white paper that we handed out here, I thought that would explained it rather nicely, because the more money you put in there, as the market gains, the more money you can make on your money. And
That's
by
assuming
us
it
being
goes up.
underfunded, if we'd have had the $85 million in there that we were fully funded, we would be so far overfunded at this point that we wouldn't have to be making a payment.
But Herb, this has been
This
going
year.
on for 20 years.
Yeah, I know. But as you can see on the last page, on page 26 on your thing, the defined benefit pension summary, the annual payments to MERS, has continually gone up every year, including the years that we had smoothed it out a little bit, although it did decline a little bit. 10 was 3.9, 11, 3.9, 12, 3.8, 13, 3.9. It's still within that range. And then 2014, it's going up to 4.2. But like Dave is saying, that probably in 2015, or
should
even
be lower.
2014,
Should drop.
that could drop. That number could be back to the 3.9 or the 3.5 because of the amount of money that we've got in there that being invested for the retirees. And because that white paper I thought was very, go back and review it again, because it really explained to me why we need to be more closely to be fully funded.
Yeah.
Sonny?
Well, my problem isn't the idea that we owe the money. My problem is the accelerated amortization.
Yeah.
That's the part that frustrates me, is the fact that MERS said, you're on a 20-year plan, you make these payments as we tell you on the actuarials, and everything is good. And then all of a sudden, they decided to accelerate the actuarial. So every year, we go backwards 2 years. And so instead of being 20 years that we were supposed to be, what are we at now, Dean? 14?
Well, we're actually, we just made a change. We're on a straight line. For 2014, you're on a 15-year amortization. In 2015, it goes to 14, but we're still on an accelerated plan. You're going to be paying those benefits out for longer than 15
Till you get to
years, for
85 million.
14 years. I mean, you're 25, 30 years minimum on paying out pension benefits, and that, as Commissioner Wheelock is saying, that is the big problem.
So is that's not going back 2 years every year?
No, we changed that.
Oh, good.
MERS had made that a change at their board level in 2012, and when we were aware that we could do that, we asked them to put us on a
Okay.
slower accelerated payment schedule.
Okay. Charlie?
And I think Sonny makes a great point, and I think the state does have an equity in this. Can we not go to the state through our representation and say, increase this length of time? That would help a lot of people in a lot of municipalities right now. There might be some
MERS
pressure
is
to-
not a state agency.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, that we own that. We have representation on that board. It's a whole separate board that we put money into, and they invest for us. It's hard for the state to come in and to be able to regulate that because they don't regulate it. So-
It used to be, but Engler
changed
split them off.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
now a separate corporation.
I'm not sure that I want the state to run it either.
Yeah, me either.
I wouldn't say for them to run it, to change the amortization line
Yeah.
that you just talked about.
It's not within their authority.
Yeah.
Could they
Chris?
not put pressure
Well,
on
the
them to
idea is
think
that you
about
owe
it?
$85
Who can do
million
that?
for what you've promised,
Yep.
and you don't have the money in the bank yet. And they want you to get it in the bank so that those
The actuarials will.
Yeah, the way they've projected that you're going to pay for this, and when the last person dies, you're going to have money in the bank to pay for it, whether, the interest assumption and for the normal cost, there are two pieces, remember. There's what you've already incurred, and there's a normal cost, which is what's going forward. So for the people who are still in the DB plan, for example, the people in the circuit court, and others who decided not to opt out and go into the DC plan at the time that they converted, we still are earning another month next month, and the following month, and the following month. And that's, about a 9% of payroll cost. So, we should have that, what they're saying to us is, you should have $85 million in the bank right now. You don't. And so you either bond for it, or you double up your payments every year for the next 10 years until we get closer to that number, and then we'll start tapering it off so that
That'll cross.
Sonny?
we'll adjust it.
David, or Jen's back there in the corner hiding too. Of our 550 employees approximately, how many are still on defined benefit programs?
Got that number?
No, but I can get it for you.
I just, when we talk about this, and
I think it's a pretty small
we
number.
forget that we still have people incurring
Plus the circuit.
liability against the defined benefit program, even though it's been closed for over 10 years. We still have people incurring liability on the county under defined benefit programs.
Dan?
This is off the subject, but not quite. On this, it says reciprocal unit resolution adoption date. It's got a bunch of different counties listed. What are we supposed to learn from this list?
It's when they,
That was my next question.
That was when the county decided to join the MERS
MERS,
retirement
yeah.
system, and back then it was with the state. There would have been board action to say we're going to offer this type of a pension benefit for our employees, and that was the date that the county became a member.
I think a
So
better
why
chart.
why would we be interested in this number? This
I think a
list?
better chart would be.
I asked for it.
I think a better chart would be in northern Michigan or the state of Michigan, how funded are each of those organizations that we have within our area?
Or just the whole state.
Yeah, I mean, we could get the whole state and figure out are we at the 50% percentile? Are we at the 75% percentile? Are we in the top 10%? I don't know. Chris?
We're at the bottom
Very
13%.
low, very low.
We are
But I think
extraordinarily
There's a
had a
reason for
chart.
that.
poorly
But
funded.
first of all,
There's a couple
is
reasons.
that true, though? Are we 13?
I would expect, yes.
It's about 13 and a half.
49%
We're at
is
the
pretty low
bottom of
funding
the
percentage.
state.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
For a pension.
Yeah. See, that's the thing that would be more important for me to know than just when people come in.
And
It's just to see a chart where we fit.
Okay, so we're pretty low.
I've got it, I can give it to you.
Here's what you, not only did the buyouts make that happen, but the level of benefit that you were providing under the defined benefit program was very rich.
Yeah.
And there are, you look at the list of counties, you've got Alpena County, you've got Aranac County, you've got a lot of small counties that never offered that kind of a benefit, ever. Clinton County had a 2% multiplier, and you had to be 60 with 30 years to retire to get the health insurance. So nobody retired, even, unless they had 30 years in. So, here it was 2.5% multiplier, which is a hugely different number, and, didn't take as long to retire. So those things cost money. If you can retire earlier and you got a bigger chunk out of your payroll that you get paid at retirement, if you got 30 years in, with a 2.5% multiplier, if you got 28 years in, it's not worth it for you to work anymore, because your multiplier times your years of service times your final average compensation is equal to what you're making.
What a nice problem to have, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really
If you're
rich
an
benefit.
employee.
If I recall, the multiplier on the yearly outs was 3, and the minimum years were 17.
That's why.
And then the
That's
market,
why.
and then the market crashed.
And
on
then the
us.
market crashed then a couple of years thereafter, and all of a sudden, there was no return on the money, so those people that made the jump from the defined benefits to the defined contribution, even existing employees who stayed and chose to take theirs out of defined benefit and put them into defined contribution, took a really huge hit in that first 3 to 5 years
Yeah,
after we
I
made the
heard that.
change. But I'm almost positive the multiplier on the early outs was 3% with a minimum of 17 years.
So you can blame past boards for that. It's already
So,
something that's
which
said.
means those people were drawing 51% of their wages to go home.
Think about that.
Wow.
Charlie?
Dean, is there any estimate as to how much more a defined benefit costs the county versus a defined contribution under our current guidelines? Just
You know,
roughly?
with new hires, you just changed it from 9 to 6.
Right.
For several groups. The groups that have that been negotiated for 2015, it still exists as a 9% of payroll that the county contributes, and then the employees contribute 3%.
Correct.
I would say that the normal cost of the DB plan as it exists, and I'm not sure, I haven't analyzed it, but it's probably around 9% if you got a 2.5% multiplier or better. So it's pretty even, but what happens in the DB plan is you don't know from one year to the next what it's going to be because, you know, the cost fluctuates on you.
One more question. We did about 20 to 25% increase this year with our pool
Our
money.
investments, yeah.
And if we stay at this current level, which is a record stock market, and it goes up 100 points next year, it would still be an all-time record, but we would not have made much on our investment. Is that correct?
I don't, you mean if it's just a flat year?
All the same.
If everything's pretty flat?
Yeah.
No, I mean, but you won't be going backwards. That'd be good.
I'm not saying you're going backwards. I
That
hope
would be
we're not
good.
going back to one of those things. But if we did, this would then change maybe what we contribute going forward from that point, because we did not make the 8%.
Yes, it's going to change every year.
Okay.
Every year that they're going to look at it, they've got 8% as an average projected.
Okay.
It's either going to be over 8 or it's going to be under 8. They're hoping that over time it's going to be an average of 8, and it's looking like, again, it's going to do that. But you never know what's going to happen next year.
Yep. Jen, do you have an answer for us
Talk
yet?
about the stock market.
I sent Sally an email. I'm sure
Okay.
she's probably just getting them.
All right,
I will let you know as soon as I hear.
all right. Other questions on defined benefit, payments, costs?
I guess I'm happy with 15 years
So,
for next year.
Well, it's better.
Yeah.
And the fact that their return on the money for 2013 was significantly higher than the 8%.
We should have a substantially lower
When
payment.
they average that out over the 10-year, we should see a payment, you know, maybe in the 3.5 instead of
3.5 range.
4.2.
Yeah.
You know, which, you know, is still a lot of money, but it's
But that's as good
better.
as a pension bond, though. Right? I mean, no?
I thought it was interesting, though, that if we hadn't smoothed out the money for the last 3 years, we would have more money in there, we would have less services being provided for the county residents, and we would have made more money on the money that we had invested. Chris, does that make sense?
You're preaching to the choir. I wanted to put more money in there 3 years ago. I would suggest that we look, I mean, come on, folks, let's be real. We have $1 million structural deficit. We are not putting money into our buildings. We're not, it's got to, and if revenue sharing, and by the way, I did it on MAC teleconference this morning, revenue sharing is pretty much gone. You know, not totally, I'm not saying totally, but.
They're discounting it.
But, you know, they're
Fingers
reducing their promise, the state of Michigan is reducing the promise of money to us that they made many years ago. That's not coming back. Even if this board decides to bond, we have got to make approximately, in my opinion, this is just me, $1 million in cuts. They're going to have to come. Now, either we do it, or the next board's going to have to do it. But I would ask you to take a look at that September 22nd, 2010 article where Beth Friend and I said, the cuts are going to have to come, and they are going to have to come. If you won't do it, the next board's going to have to. So let's figure out what we have to do. Now, I do believe that we can take a look at outsourcing. There are opportunities out there. where we can outsource. Those jobs are not lost. Let's get our department heads in here. They've been willing to work with us. The sheriff has, Bonnie, the county clerk has. There are opportunities out there, but we've got to make these cuts.
Other comments? Okay, on your desk is a calendar. And that's the best guess that Dave and Chris have been able to put together for departments to be able to come in and make a presentation to us.
Looks good.
fine.
Is there anything in there that you think might be a problem?
No.
So
Because we need
you've
to send
allotted
a
the
letter
time to
out?
them that you think? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
these, like, they're mostly half-hour deals, so for a 2-hour meeting, four departments
And
each
Chris
time.
has talked to some of these departments so that they're comfortable with the dates that they got in, like the health department. The first time they could do it was on the 12th, and so she plugged them in there. The courts had asked to be on Fridays, so that's when they're in there. Chris?
I don't know about the prosecutor.
Elisa Kropa,
Sheriff's
last
Department,
night
yeah.
was elected president of the
Yeah, I know.
Parks Board. To cheers from not only the public, but from her fellow board members.
Cool.
She will be here Wednesday night to request a meeting, a joint meeting with the county board as soon as possible.
That's on the 19th.
Jason, our Parks Director, Jason Jones, said that he would send out a doodle, so I would ask you all to please take a look at your calendars and respond to that doodle meeting request as soon as the opportunity arises.
We have it on there for February 19th.
Oh, I didn't turn it over, thank you.
That's the budget meeting.
That's just the
That,
budget meeting.
That's the budget meeting, no, joint meeting before the budget meeting,
She wanted to have I
Oh.
think she wants to
A
have a
philosophical policy thing.
so that we can, yeah.
Meeting with the board.
The Parks Board wants
At
to
the
be
reg-
on the
maybe
same
at the
page as the
regular
county
meeting.
board.
I-
That's a good thing.
You know, we can do it and not call it a budget meeting, we can just call it a joint meeting as part of our budget presentation. I mean, I don't have a problem doing it. I have a problem trying to throw another meeting in my schedule and everybody else's.
I think what they're asking for is completely different than a budget discussion.
Well, I
It
understand.
is.
I think you're
Yeah,
right.
I understand,
Wait to hear from our new president Wednesday night.
okay? I mean, it's just, you know, if we can do that in collaboration or cooperation with our budget thing, and then if we have to have more time after that, we can
Okay.
always go back to the 28th and do additional meeting for the Parks and Recreation, because that meeting is open on the 28th of February.
You'll be wanting to communicate with the new president on
Yes,
that.
So one of the things that this doesn't cover is the March meetings, as to what we would like to see in March. You know, we have scheduled these into March, and
We need to get that.
you know, as to what we would like to see carrying forward, starting with the Friday, the 28th, and going on into the March meetings. You know, one of the questions that I personally would like to see us add into there is a meeting with John Axe to talk about the possibility or whether or not we should even continue to look at bonding. So we could put that as part of our meeting in March if we wanted to. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, is he still our bond counsel, or did that contract expire at the end of December?
Well, that contract did expire at the end of December.
Have we bid it out?
No, we have not.
Are we going to?
And that's a good question.
That was cute.
Well, we need to.
Thank you,
We just-
Dean.
We haven't.
Can we just have that ready for RMA to move forward with that, or what?
To bid?
Yeah, well, you know,
Come
I'm not
Ways
so
and Means.
thrilled with the whole idea of bidding it out and sticking yourself with one bond counsel and one financial consultant.
All right.
Each issuance that comes up, John Axe is probably great for the water projects and all that thing. I don't think he was the person we really needed for the
Pension?
retirement.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Because it just was a special deal. But I don't know that we're going to have that many boutique-type bond issuances that I think John Axe can outbid everybody because he does have everything in-house.
But
The next one that comes up, we might just want to start taking quotes. on
I
how
would
much.
like to do that.
Maybe we could see what else is out there and
By the way, Chris, another question that you'd asked the other day about the surveyor,
Yes.
I was told that we do have all the stuff here in the county.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I got that
Thank you.
It
verified,
is
too.
available, he has a key that he can go down there, be able to get all that data.
Thank
all that
you.
information. It is turned over by Bob Mitchell to the equalization,
Equalization
to
department.
GIS.
Reiner, and he is in charge of all the data.
That is good news. Thank you, Mr.
Thought you
Chairman.
might be interested in that.
Yeah, I remember the battle with
Yeah.
the septic plant.
Dan?
Okay, this is just me. I'm still kind of confused about, general things like, and maybe you are too, so I'm asking you guys and girls, have we made up our mind, are we going to get the bond? Do we need the bond and the $1 million cut both? Are we in the process of deciding that?
Once we get done with all
think
these
so.
department heads, then we could schedule the first Wednesday in March to discuss what we've heard and whether or not we want to bring any particular department back because we want to have more information from them, and that we would like to see them to be able to look at whether or not they would like to, or whether we would like them to do more cuts. So this is information, pulling this information. When we get it done, then let's have that discussion. That's why I said,
About bonding.
in March, we could talk about the bond, but I think we need to talk about the budget cuts first.
Okay,
Where
because
we
we
wanna
may,
go.
we may need to do both, right? It's possible. Yeah.
I would expect that we'll do both.
Okay.
Sonny?
Well, I would suggest that we still have February 28th open. I would think at that point, we've heard from all of these departments. I would like to do an assessment of what we know at that point.
Okay.
And do an evaluation of, is there additional information that we need? Do we have all the information? Do we need more information? If so, from whom? And then we can decide what direction we want to go to as far as, meeting with bond counsel or whatever. But I think we have to get to a point, these meetings are collecting information. At the end of collection of that information, we have to have an opportunity to assess the information we have and determine whether or not we have enough information.
Okay? Does that make sense?
So my question is just asking you as friends, I feel like I can't make that decision yet, and I don't have an opinion. Is that like, are we all about the same boat, or?
Yeah.
Let's look at the cuts first and then the bond later.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just a footnote, Dave and I are not going to be here on the 28th of February, and he's gone on the 27th of February, so if we're going to have a meeting to discuss something in general, we need to pick that date and time. That's a convenient among everybody.
Chris?
I plan on being gone that Friday as well.
So let's cancel the meeting on the 28th then. Is that comfortable with everybody?
February?
Yep.
So then we'll go into the March meeting on the first Wednesday of March to look at
That's fine.
the review of everything.
That'd be fine.
That'd be fine.
When is MAC?
Oh,
Late in March, middle of May.
Hang on.
late
Yeah,
March.
mid-March.
21st or something.
Okay, so we want to make sure that we put that in our calendars for March then.
So on March 5th, we're going to do an assessment evaluation of the information we have.
Okay?
March 5th?
That would, if I'm counting right.
Okay.
4, 5.
Right. Good. Okay,
There's not 29 days in February this year.
so.
You don't get a birthday, Sonny.
You don't get older this year.
I can't wait to see what that merge.
Other questions, comments on this calendar?
I think some of these departments are going to go fairly simply, Some of them are going to be a little more complicated than we think, and there's going to be a lot of stuff, I think that, like our meeting on February 5th with facilities management, that's, soil conservation's a good one to put in there with it, because soil conservation's going to be easy, but facilities isn't. And there's going to be an awful lot of unknowns, By February 5th, we will not have the new natural gas numbers, and that by itself makes a huge difference to this county.
You want to move that to anything?
No, it's fine to have it because, but I'm just telling you, there's some of the things that make a big difference. If you remember a couple of years ago, you know, we save $75,000 a year by negotiating the
Sonny,
natural gas
Sonny works
contract.
very closely every year with Danny Brown because Sonny is extraordinarily knowledgeable about natural gas prices.
gas?
It's a gift.
He's got gas.
It's part of his business. It makes the difference whether or not he's
Part of
going to
what
make a
I-
profit.
And MAC, by the way, is the 24th through the 26th of March.
Okay, so it's toward the end of March. So, this, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're able to give the departments this calendar so they know what's going on, so they can prepare, so they're ready for giving us the information we're going to need. Okay? Any other questions?
I can't believe we're
She's
done.
got your credit card.
I can,
You got a second public comment.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, John, you want to make some comment? We'd love to have you.
We'll let you exceed the time limit.
Good afternoon, John Syke, Planning and Development Director for Grand Traverse County. I just had I was looking at your packet this afternoon for this meeting and just had a kind of a comment in terms of the, on page 8, the mandated and discretionary services. In terms of the Brownfield administration, it's shown there as a general fund expenditure, and what occurs is the county does upfront that money, and then it's reimbursed at the end of the year by the revenues from that particular program. That does not necessarily have to be operated in that instance. It could essentially operate as a similar to an enterprise fund and be purely on its own. You do not necessarily have to upfront those funds for the budget year. The other comment was in terms of the staffing for the planning department. It shows a 75% increase over the last several years. And in reality, the impact on the general fund has been flat at 2 persons for that whole time period. Those increases, why there was an increase in the personnel by 4, did not necessarily impact directly to the general fund. They were subsidized by or funded by the Brownfield program, the housing programs, EPA grants, et cetera. So I just kind of wanted to make that kind of comment in terms of when you're looking at some of these.
You have to also remember, we took the housing commission, took the housing back into our county planning department instead of having that run through the city housing commission.
Right.
And us making a contribution to that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
John.
think it's also interesting to note at our last meeting for Brownfield, the presentation from the Village of Grand Traverse Commons was quite enlightening as to some of the work that our Brownfield dollars have done and the number of jobs that have been created and are currently being done right now. There's over 50 employees over there working on the Cordia building to eliminate lead-based paint and asbestos, and I don't know about asbestos, but lead-based paint, and being able to do that. So, and none of that stuff would have ever been able to be there if we hadn't put Brownfield into this. And also the being a enterprise zone has helped it also. But I think, you know, maybe a presentation to the commissioners at some time about what the Minervinis have done over there. There is a report that will be on the Brownfields I think they've added it to the one of the web-based parts of the county commission, that particular presentation. So if you want to see that, look at the Brownfield for the last Wednesday, and you could be able to see really how much of an impact that really has in our community. Chris?
I'm going to touch upon my Michigan Association of Counties teleconference that I had this morning. It was 2 hours. One of the things they did ask counties for is the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding DDAs, TIFs, the tax capturing that's going on, what has been positive, what has been negative. So if you get a chance, give Dina a call at Michigan Association of Counties. The other thing I talked about, I did touch upon the veterans tax, the tax exemption for property tax. And I was told that other counties are not having the same experience that we are. And it is indeed supposed to be a disability that is service-related, and it really is up to the local unit of government when they grant that exemption. So I don't know whether or not, this is what I heard today. It's the first time.
That's different, yeah.
So I don't know whether or not someone needs to get together with the treasurers, the assessors, whatever it is, but give Dina a call at MAC and see, and talk to her briefly about how other counties are being affected versus Grand Traverse County.
Sure.
And I know Representative Schmidt has introduced legislation to make counties whole. Don't hold your breath. There doesn't seem to be a drum roll in support of that.
Gotta hand it to him for putting it out
And
there.
as far as the extra money that is a surplus at the state for revenue, there's no drum roll to make counties whole on revenue sharing either. So,
My question on the revenue sharing, Chris, and I don't know if you can answer this question, is Detroit became into revenue sharing rather quickly. So did they cut them? That same percentage is what they're expecting to
Yeah,
cut everybody else?
they've been reducing the overall pie.
I know
year
they've been
after year,
reducing
and
the pie.
It's a little bit here, a little bit there.
The ones that are
Mostly in
currently funded are
off-election
getting
years.
dropped.
Yeah.
The biggest cuts are in the off-election years. And, Wayne County went in 2009. I mean, here we are in 2014. We're not going to be in funding until 2015. They've made 5 years' worth of cuts to revenue sharing.
and
And
also.
Wayne County has gotten those cuts.
Yeah, they've been reduced, just
Yeah.
like everyone else has, but
That's why they're going to
we're
declare
still
bankruptcy.
on the promise. We're still on the amount that's coming out of our taxpayers' pockets, so that the state can keep spending our money that they promised to us.
Yeah,
And when we go back into formula, they said they would make us whole for that number.
but they're
and
not going to.
They've cut it so much that we're going to take quite a beating.
Now, the administrative fee, the new legislation where it says
Yeah.
the administrative, the 1% fee that is charged on late taxes for our delinquent tax fund, the legislation that's being proposed says that county treasurers can charge up to 1%. The Michigan Association of Counties, our Economic Development and Legislative Committee today overwhelmingly did not support that. We are, however, being opposed by county treasurers.
Of course.
Well, because county treasurers can then, they run for election and they can go out to their constituents and say, townships, hey, I'm not going to charge you the 1%. It's.
Sounds like campaign funds for out of county tax dollars, to me.
The
Sorry,
Michigan
that's the way I
Association of
look at
Counties
it.
came out strongly
It allows treasurers to
opposed
do that.
this morning. I don't know where that's going, but it got shot down
By
decisively.
the way, you notice that I did
Bad
not
piece of
keel over and
legislation,
die
that would be.
because I was holding my breath to see if we were going to get revenue sharing.
And we all appreciate that, Herb.
Just one quick comment, if we could relay this back to MAC. I mean, the biggest news story out there is the states all of a sudden got this huge surplus of money.
We want our
And they
money.
And they haven't decided what to do with it. Well,
it's
we want-
ours.
We want that surplus to come back to fulfill the promises
I
they
don't
made
know
to
how we
counties.
can do this.
We
I
can
really
pass a
don't.
resolution.
Yeah, we can ask.
We need to put some pressure on them folks down there. on
And
this
quite
deal.
honestly, I think it wouldn't hurt to call the governor's office. I know
Well, there
he-
is a governor's representative up here, and we should be able to make sure he gets the message that we definitely need to have that. So, I can't remember what the guy's name is. Larry, do you remember?
Well, there's a governor's rep in Marquette, and one
Marquette.
in Detroit.
Yeah. So, but we need to get him.
Yep.
If you can get his name, and then we'll get that.
Yep.
We should all make phone calls to him, so if you could send that out. By the way, just to let you know that on our website, where it says commissioners, there is an extra button now that says if you want to email all commissioners, that you can hit that and send your email, and it will go to all of us individually.
Good.
So, and I want to say thanks to Sarah for putting that in. I asked, and within 2 days, she said, it's done. And I went, you did that already? And that was cool. So, but anyway, so if you go into our website, under commissioners, and you can individually email commissioners, but you can also hit a button and the email will go to all commissioners. So.
Okay, good.
I saw Jen give you a piece of paper. Did she have an answer
She
for you?
did have an answer for us. Where'd I put my piece of paper?
Was that the if you forgot where you put
We have 96 total in the DB plan,
of
and 37 of them are from circuit court.
How many?
37.
out of 500 employees, or 350? How many employees do we have?
500 plus.
Well, we're really narrowing this out.
It's about 20%, though, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I took,
quite a
I
bit,
took a
you're
shot. Remember, didn't I say 20% to you
Yeah, you did.
before you got the number?
Yep.
By
about
George,
right.
go buy.
I'm going on, I'm buying a lotto
I was
ticket.
gonna say, let me go in on that with you.
All right. Did you say it was 90,
96.
96, and 37 of them are in the circuit courts?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, we're adjourned.
All right.
And Dave, you'll like this story. The Wayne County Commissioner this morning said...